Morning everyone. Today we are going to begin with the lesson Land Resources and Agriculture. First of all, we should know why land is important. Land is important for human beings as well as animals because it is used as resource for production, for residence, for recreation, for fields to grow crops, for pastures where animals can graze. That is why land is very important. Now, as per the land revenue records, if we can see, the land is categorized into forest, land put to non-agricultural uses, barren and wastelands, then area under permanent pastures and grazing lands, area under miscellaneous tree crops and groves, which is not included in the net sown area, cultivable wasteland, then current fallow other than current fallow, and the net sown area. Let us study the land categorization in detail. What does forest include? Forest includes the actual forest area and the forest area covered by the government. They both are different. How come they are different? Forest areas are the areas recorded as forest land irrespective of the existence of trees based on records of State Revenue Department. As per the records, the forest area existing in India is 22.5%, whereas the forest cover is based on the aerial photographs and the satellite images, which is only 20.55% existing in India. Now, what is the land put to non-agricultural uses? This is the land which is occupied by the people for settlement in rural and urban areas. Of course, the roads, the canals, the buildings, the industry, shops, everything are included in this. With the expansion of the secondary and the tertiary activities, there has been an increase in the land use in this area. Now, what is barren and wasteland? As per the name suggests, which cannot be used for cultivation using the available technology. It includes barren hilly terrains, then even the desert lands, the swampy marshes, the ravines, etc. Now the next category is area under permanent pastures and grazing lands. This is the land which is used by the people of rural areas for grazing their cattle. Most of this land is owned by panchayat or by the government. A very small proportion of this land is privately owned. The land used by village panchayat comes under common property resources, which we will be studying in detail in the coming chapters. Area under miscellaneous trees, crops and groves. This is actually the fruit trees, the orchards which come under this category, and this is mainly privately owned by the people. Now, what do you mean by current fallow? First of all, we should understand the meaning of the word fallow, which means uncultivated land. Current fallow, the land which is left without cultivation for one or less than one agricultural year. It is done so that the land regains its fertility through its natural processes. Now, the second part, following this, if the land is left fallow for more than one agricultural year, then what happens? That is cultivable land which is left uncultivated for more than a year. That will come under the category of fallow other than current fallow lands. But it should be less than 5 years. If it is more than 5 years, then what will happen? It is called as cultivable waste land, a land which is left fallow for more than 5 years. It can be brought under cultivation after improving it through reclamation practices, that is using artificial fertilizers and this. Now, what is net sown area? As the name suggests, net sown area is basically the area which comes under cultivation or the agricultural land. on which crops are sown, harvested. Now, who maintains this land records? Land records are basically maintained by Land Revenue Department, and the records are kept in Land Revenue Records. I repeat, land use records are maintained by Land Revenue Department and are kept in Land Revenue Records. The Survey of India is responsible for measuring the geographical area of administrative units of India. The land surveys is done by Survey of India. Now, land use changes in India. With time, we have found that the land use have changed in India. If we talk about the era which was before independence, the land was mainly used for agriculture. But now, land use in a region depends on the nature of economic activities carried out in that region. If you live in urban areas, land is mostly used for settlements, it is used for industries, it is used for schools. But if you go to the rural areas, it is basically used for agriculture. So that has changed with time. Now, economic activities, the activities which are related to money only, it depends on the size of economy, the composition of the economy that changes over time. The pressure on the land for agriculture activities does not decline. With the change in economic activities, the land use too changes. What do you mean by the size of the economy? Size of the economy grows due to increase in population, change in the income levels, available technology, and as a result, what happens? The pressure on the land increases with time. The size of the economy, that is, the economic activities changes. Why do they change? If there is increase in population, of course, if there is change in income level, if the available technology, and with that there will be change in the pressure on the land. Now, what do you mean by the composition of the economy changes over time? What do you mean by composition? It means that the type of economic activity that we are into. Before independence, India was basically dependent on primary activities. But if we see these days, the secondary and tertiary sectors are growing very fast, much faster than the primary sector. And it is very common in the developing countries like India. And this gradual shift from agricultural uses to non-agricultural uses is basically the composition of the economy change over time. Example, the agricultural land is now being used for building purposes. Because of this, the pressure on the land for agricultural activities does not decline. Why? The reason is increase in population. Moreover, with the increase in population, the demand for food is increasing day by day, and that is why the pressure on the land for agricultural activities is also increasing. India has undergone many changes with the economy over past 4 to 5 decades. That is almost 40 to 50 years. There has been a major change within the economy, and this of course has changed the land use in the country. Now let us have a look at this graph. You can see this graph, and it has been categorized. In this graph you can find changes in the use of land between 1960 to 61 and 2006 to 2008 and 9. This is the graph basically to that. If you see the forest area, then area under cultivation, these are the graphs. Somewhere you will find that there is increase, whereas somewhere there is a decline. In this graph, if you notice carefully, you will see that 3 categories have undergone an increase, whereas the 4 categories have registered declines. What are the 3 categories that have seen an increase? The categories that have seen an increase is the share area of the forest, that is the forest area, has increased. Area under non-agricultural uses have also increased, and current fallow lands have also increased. Why there is a reason for increase in this area? If you look at the forest area, we have already seen that the forest area, if you see that in the forest areas, this is the forest areas have basically increased because it is as per the government records, but which is not true, as we have already studied in the previous part, that forest area and forest cover are two different things. The increase, this change in the three areas of land use is because of increase in secondary and tertiary activities, and expansion of area under both rural and urban settlements. Now, if I saw about the increase, this is what I was talking about, that is the forest area. It is an actual increase in the demarcated area of the forest area under the forest, whereas the actual increase in the forest cover in the country has not increased, it has actually declined. The increase in the current fallow depends upon natural factors like variability of rainfall, cropping cycles. Now, the 4 areas which have shown a serious decline as per the graph, these are the barren and wastelands have decreased. Cultivable wasteland has also decreased. Area under pastures and tree crops have also decreased, and the net sown area has also declined. What are the reasons for this decline? The reasons for the decline is, first, if we talk about the pressure on the land has increased. Why has the pressure on the land increased? Because of the increase in population, both in agricultural and non-agricultural sectors. The wastelands and the cultivable wastelands are being used. Secondly, if I talk about the decline in the net sown area, started in late 90s. Though it has shown a bit of improvement these days, but this decline is basically the area which was used for agriculture is now being used for non-agricultural uses. Thirdly, if I talk about the decline in land under pastures and grazing land is also declining. And why is this declining? Because of illegal encroachment due to the expansion of cultivation on common pastures. As the land is not available for agriculture, so the land which was used for pastures is now converted into cultivated land. Land, according to its ownership, can broadly be classified into two broad heads: private land and common property resources. Now, what is private land? As per the name suggests, it is basically the land owned by an individual or group of individuals. You must have already studied this in class 10. And what is common property resources? CPR, the land which is owned by state and it is meant for the use of community. Now, common property resources, what does it mean? Common, which is common for everyone can use it. It is a property which everyone can use it, and it's actually a resource. It is community's natural resource where every member has a right to access and usage. Common community forest, if you can community forest, pasture lands, village water bodies. These are the examples of common property resources. What do they provide? They provide fodder for livestock, fuel for the households, and minor forest products like fruits, nuts, fiber, medicinal plants, etc. Why is it important? Why is common property resource very important? It is basically important in the rural areas for the landless and the marginal farmers, the weaker sections of the society, because they are dependent on it. They do not have an access to the land. So that is why they are completely dependent on CPR for their livelihood. And of course, for women who live in rural areas, who collect fodder and fuel fuel from the CPR that is there. Now let us begin with agricultural land use in India. How is the land used in India? Agriculture is basically an activity which is completely dependent on land. If there is no land, there will be no agriculture, whereas secondary and tertiary activities are not dependent on land. Thus, if there is no access to the land, then it will only result in poverty, and that too in rural areas, because agriculture or primary activity is very common in rural areas rather than in urban areas. Moreover, quality of the land affects the productivity of agriculture. If the land is fertile, the productivity will be very good. The output or the crops produced will be very good, of good quality. Whereas if the land is not very fertile, then the production or the output of the crops will not be very good. Similarly, in rural areas, the land ownership has a social value. Of course, it has it, and it serves as a security for credit, natural hazards or life contingencies, and also adds to the social status. In villages, if you see, you will find that people belonging to high society or high class own a large amount of land, whereas the marginal farmers or the landless farmers are basically the people who work for the rich farmers. Now, another very important thing, this is what we have seen, that agriculture is very important. We are dependent on agriculture for food, but the net sown area in India is very limited. If I talk about the net sown area, that is basically the cultivable land or the agricultural land on which actually the crops are grown. This cannot be increased because the land size cannot be increased. Whereas land is used for other purposes also, for settlements, for industries, for roads, for railways. So the net sown area cannot be increased. But with the increase in population, with the increase in demand for food, there is an urgent need to evolve and adopt land saving technologies. Such technologies can be classified under two heads: those which raise the yield of any particular crop per unit area of land, and secondly, those which increase the total output per unit area of land from all crops grown in one agricultural year by increasing the land intensity. What, according to you, should be a better method to increase the output? It is, I think, basically increase the total output per unit area of land from all the crops. Now, increase the total output per unit area is the best method. What will happen if we adopt this technology? Using a technology that will increase the total output per unit area, it will increase the output from the limited land. The land is limited, but the output or the production of the crops will increase. Moreover, it will increase the demand for labor too. With the increase, what will be the resultant? It will not only help in fuller utilization of land resources, moreover, it will reduce unemployment in rural economies. That is, the people will be employed for all year round and there will not be any migration to the urban areas. Now, how do we calculate the cropping intensity? That is, cropping intensity, CI. How will we calculate it? Cropping intensity calculated in percentage is GCA upon net sown area into 100. With this, we end the lesson. Your teacher Pallavi Gunjal wishes you a safe and happy stay at home.